idea for all this really came from a dream?
Yes, it did.
Good evening and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Suzanne Ross. Suzanne is a compassionate coach and caring mentor who is passionate about healing emotional trauma and clearing mental blockages, balancing your physical energy by realigning your energy centers and restoring emotional, mental, and physical health and vitality. She's a certified health and wellness expert specializing in stress-reducing meditation, dynamic movement therapy for healing the mind-body connection, nutritional coaching and supplementation, and personal counseling for anxiety, emotional and physical pain, and addiction recovery. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thanks so
Welcome,
much
Suzanne.
for having me, Jerry. Thank you, Nish.
It's our pleasure.
I'm very excited about being here.
I told you before we started, I had some questions for you, and I'm going to weave them into our general conversation. But I just want to tell you, I'm excited after having checked out your early bio. I think it was a PowerPoint you were giving somewhere for something, and it went into your bio. So that got me extra excited to have you here and chat with you this evening.
Great. I am transparent. So ask away.
Don't tell that to Jerry.
Right? Now that we're on the air, especially.
Yeah, we'll leave that private. Boy, they. All right. So let's jump into it. Take us back to your earliest memories and kind of give us a picture of what pops out with your earliest memories.
I like to start actually before I was born because it really has had a significant impact on my life growing up. And that was an abduction experience that my father had when he was just 18 years old in Saskatchewan, where he was born and raised in a small town called Leader. And during this incident, him and some buddies were driving down a dirt road, and they saw this white light behind the car, in front of the car, out in the field. So they pulled over to check it out. And next thing they knew, they were all sitting in their car thinking, what are we doing here? Let's get out of here. And when they started to pull away, they saw this white light merge with a larger orange light out in the field and shoot off into space. So they went to the nearest farmhouse and knocked on the door. Hey, you guys seeing these lights? And the woman was furious. They were knocking on her door after midnight, and they were stunned that it was after midnight because they had left their house just after 7 and they only lived a few miles away. And that's when they all realized that they had experienced missing time. And my father, the next day, realized that he had a triangular shaped metallic object in his wrist. And growing up, he called this his alien chip. And so reflecting up on that experience, and always wondered what happened there. As I got to be older and became familiar with ufology and this idea of implants that facilitated continued communication with otherworldly beings, I started to realize that shortly after my father had this implant put in after this missing time experience, he was recruited by NCR. And he actually became a pioneer on the front lines of the emerging computer age with just, a one-room schoolhouse education. Shortly after that, he was moved to Mount Shasta, where I was born. Of course, being born and raised in Mount Shasta is itself quite a otherworldly experience. And I had a lot of friends in the forest who were fairies, even trolls, and I could see invisible kids that had passed on, and I had all kinds of friends. And my mom and dad finally built me a dollhouse out back because I never shut up talking to all my invisible friends. But one of my earliest childhood memories was that I would be sleeping in my room at night, and these 3 beings would come down the hall into my room, and I called them Caspers because as a little kid, I thought they were Casper the ghost and his friends. They were blue shimmering beings, and they would come around my bed and do some sort of energy transmission. But I knew that it was loving, and I looked forward to them coming, and I appreciated and enjoyed whatever energetic transmission that they did. After a few years, and after we moved away from Mount Shasta, those experiences ceased to happen. And even my psychic abilities faded out. And I just became a kid.
This
My
is
father, go ahead.
this is where I wanted to ruminate a bit. And one of the reasons
Okay.
why I usually ask our guests the earliest memories in this life, and because I had heard your PowerPoint earlier, I knew you had pre-birth memory. And but you didn't say this particular word in that PowerPoint, which just gave me the chills, Suzanne. And I've said it on air for years and years, and you're the only other person I've heard say it. Casper. My experience with these little blue beings also would come through my window and come to the end of my bed, and I always called them Caspers. It just gave me the chills to hear
Ah,
you say that. Absolute chills.
wow.
You're the first person I've heard say that. Because it was on my agenda to ask about the blue beings. You described them, and the picture in your PowerPoint was, a characterized picture, but it looked like the ones I experienced, which were just two. And actually, I thought there was one for a long time, but they kind of came together through the window and would separate. So I was never able to parse out if they were one or two because they were so closely linked.
Wasn't
Mm.
it Rudolf Steiner who said that the orgone energy was blue energy?
I'm not sure.
Was that
That's a good question. But it just gave me the chills to hear someone else say Casper's. I mean, I'm on air for years saying this. So that is extra amazing to me
juicy?
straight away. They also were very friendly, and I felt no fear with them. They actually felt, as I've told people, they weren't like little grays or anything. They were blue. And so I wanted to step into this space for a minute with you and kind of dive further, because what I heard you talking on that little PowerPoint was not much, and right here you kind of move forward too. Was there anything? So where was your bedroom located in the house? Was it first floor, basement, second floor?
We only had a one-story house at the time in Mount Shasta,
Hmm.
and my bedroom was at the end of the hall on the left.
Okay, so first story
I
too.
clearly
And
remember.
it's amazing to me. I love when these things happen. And also, did they communicate to you?
I didn't recall specific messages, just this feeling of unconditional love, just
Yes.
this pure love.
Yeah, same here. There was nothing. I never remember like words coming telepathically or anything. They were there. They made me feel safe, and there was a lot of stuff going
Yes.
on that I felt like they were definitely friendly in there to help me feel safe, like I was protected and watched. Uh, so I just deeply profound. And also, so in this before birth experience, do you recall having been birthed, that process?
I don't recall having been birthed. My very first memory is being in a high chair in the corner of the kitchen. And I very specifically remember this white high chair. And I remember looking at my fingers and my toes and laughing and thinking to myself, wow, I came back as a kid. I came back as a little baby. I thought it was hilarious, my little fingers and toes. And I looked in the corner, and my mother's back was to me, and she was preparing food. And I was thinking, oh, good. This woman is preparing food for me. Like she loves me. She cares about me. She's going to take care of me. All is well.
Oh my God.
But
This is
yes.
Jerry. You've heard me tell the story a million times. My first memory is similar, where it's like we honed it down to 6 months, and because we moved out of the house at that time, it was the same thing. This is so uncanny. On air, I've been talking about this. I just talked about it the other night on Joe Roop's show, and where I felt like a sleep paralysis because I couldn't move the baby, new now that I'm in a baby body, I couldn't move, and it was gelatinous like, and I felt like I was in sleep paralysis, but I was conscious. And again, my mother came in, but I'm in my bassinet, and so same experience. Everyone's heard me talk about it, so I'm not going to relive it. But this is uncanny. This is
She's your
like
clone.
That is.
descriptions are almost identical.
I can.
Almost
Yes. And
identical.
I have honestly never heard any of your broadcasts. So, yeah, that is really uncanny for sure.
Truly. And and you didn't talk about this in the stuff I was listening to today. So that's just more. I'm intrigued. This is going to go somewhere. Definitely. And I'll spare people from hearing me
Off the
pontificate
rails
on.
is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. This is amazing. Okay, so I'm going to get back on track. I just am in awe of this at the moment. So these earliest memories of when you just gave us, can you also set up, give us a picture or set the foundation for the things, so the youngest you in this flesh, the stuff that sticks out that, could be mundane, not important, but significant back there, like stuff that you enjoyed. Like, did you have a relationship with nature? Was there any pop culture like cartoons or movies, stuff like that? Were you an only child? And just the basic foundation of the house of Suzanne Ross.
Growing up in Mount Shasta, we were surrounded by the forests of Mount Shasta. And my sister was 3 years older than me. It's just the two of us. And my parents had told her that they were bringing home a baby for her from the hospital. So right away, my sister figured out that I was her new baby doll. And so she drugged me everywhere with her, which was wonderful. But we would go play in the forests. And my parents had this big black cat named Lucifer, of all things. And
I love
this
that,
big,
by the way. It's a cute picture. I saw the picture of Lucifer. This story is remarkable.
Right? It is. Lucifer was a big cat with green eyes, and she would send Lucifer out into the forest with us, my mother, because Lucifer would run off and eat critters that, would come around. And Lucifer would also bring home critters. My parents would let Lucifer run free all night long. And in the morning, they'd open the door and he'd be sitting there licking his chops, all proud because he had a bird or a rabbit or something on the doorstep for them. One morning, my mother opened the door and screamed bloody murder. And she told us to get away from the door. Well, as a squirrely little kid, I snuck my way to the door, and my sister did too, because she has a clear recall of this as well. And there, laying on the doorstep, was a little man. I say man, but this little troll had no genitals. It had fuzzy afro type hair, and it was dead. It was laying there, and I'll never forget it. My mother grabbed a blanket, wrapped this little being in a blanket, and buried it in the backyard. My sister and I recognized this troll because playing in the forests out there, these little trolls would peek out from behind the trunks of the trees. And we thought they lived in the trees or under the trees.
Yes.
We also were familiar with fairies, and fairies would flit around in the leaves of the trees. And we could clearly see these beings and they would play with us and chase after us and fly around us. And, we both remember that. But specifically, the ability to talk to kids as spirit beings, very close relationships with these spirit beings. And they would come in and sit down with us at dinner, and I'd be chatting with them. And my parents were like, okay, it's time to forget about the invisible being and chat with us. And I'm like, yeah, but it's Sally and Bobby. And yes, I enjoyed my invisible friends.
This is
So
it's
that
just
really-
so remarkable. Was the little troll clothed at all?
No, totally naked. They didn't wear clothes.
Yeah, I mean, when you
troll-
said it didn't really have a crotch, but I mean, I never know. And
Why did they have such English names?
what?
Oh, my invisible friends?
Yeah, if they were trolls, you'd think they would have, like, I don't know, weird names.
I didn't name the trolls. The names that I gave you were names of the invisible kids
Oh, I'm sorry.
that I would
okay. I
play
thought they
with.
were troll
Yeah,
kids.
and I just made them up for the context of having
I'm so
a
sorry.
reference. That's okay. You have a vivid imagination. Thank you for that.
What's great
Yes,
about
it's,
this, were you able to talk with your mother later about that experience?
We have brought it up before, and it's like she doesn't really want to talk about it. It
Mhm.
scares her to this day. In fact, my mom is spooky, because we've had a lot of things happen since my dad had that experience growing up. I mean, we had craft come over the house, we had craft fly through the yard. Yeah, all kinds of episodes have happened over the years, and she don't want to talk about it. But my father, he wants to talk about it. He talked about it. He is no longer with us, but we talked about stuff like that all the time. Of course, he waited until we were old enough not to be freaked out by his stories. But I came to learn that he also encountered Bigfoot in Saskatchewan, and actually the Sasquatch got its name after Saskatchewan because they're
Yes.
so prevalent there. Anywhere there's Sasquatch, there's UFOs.
Do you recall his story of Sasquatch?
Just that the Sasquatch would come up from running water. It seems like they would live down by running water, and they would come up through the woods, and they would be seen more by mistake than anything else because they could be very elusive at will otherwise. So
Yeah, that it's
Mhm.
interesting. What do you, I'm sure you do know, like your astro trinity, your sun, moon, and rising.
I don't know that off the top of my head. No, I'm not super into astrology. I love it, and I've got astrological readings, a number of times, but that's not a passion of mine. Even though I totally believe all of this, to do with planetary and solar alignments and everything.
Do you know at least your sun sign though?
I don't.
What is the date of, like, the month and the day?
9/10, September 10th. And I don't mind giving away my age. It's 1964.
Oh, you're
we
my
can,
age.
yeah, we can pull a fast chart.
I
too, but that
am?
doesn't. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
February 65 here.
So back in this stuff, were you raised religious at all?
No, not at all. My father was essentially an atheist until he got older. And my sister and I both stepped on a spiritual path, and then he started to open his mind to spirituality. But he was more of a scientist. He was an engineer and a scientist, and I didn't believe in this vision of a man, 6,000 years ago on top of a hill saying, "Let there be light," and everything began in a moment. He just thought that was
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
Um, but my mom wasn't raised religious either. She was very much into academics. She had a master's degree and she was into art and culture, but religion, no.
But
No.
I think it's a gift. It allows you to be open.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, same here.
Absolutely.
Was there anything in pop culture that you enjoyed, cartoons and movies at the time?
Yeah, I love cartoons. Cartoons were wild back then.
They were.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and Bugs Bunny. I mean, some of these cartoons, man, it's hard to believe they were actually for kids, you know?
Oh, I know.
Witchy Poo?
Loved Witchy Poo, HR Puffin stuff. Okay, so at this
Sesame
time,
Street.
oh yeah, oh man, those were the days. So, all right, back here also. So we're gonna move forward. But what was your relationship with any kind of childhood fears? Did you have any, the typicals like under the bed and in the wood and all that, the dark?
I didn't. I was pretty fearless. My mother called me Susie Sunshine. I just loved everything and everyone. And I would go anywhere and do anything and say hi to everyone I encountered. And at night, I'd be surrounded by my stuffed animals. And I didn't have any fear. And my household was very pleasant and very positive, and there was no yelling or anger or rage or anything in the household either. So,
Nice.
yeah, I felt very safe in my household, and they nurtured my sunny disposition.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it certainly has paid. I mean, it certainly shows all of this really solid foundation you have is pleasant to hear and see and experience. What was your
oh,
relationship
thank you.
with dreaming as a child?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you should ask that. I was talking to Jerry before we came on air. It was because when I first read, we talk about your dreams. I was like, oh, my dreams and hopes of doing this and that. No, actually, dream time.
Literal. Yeah.
Oh, dream time. I mean, I remember one dream as a kid of being chased and not being able to run fast enough. And then my legs actually giving out and falling. And I was being chased through a wheat field by a big African American man. And he would like get close enough to touch me or grab me, and I'd wake up. But that was a recurring dream. I often wondered where that came from. And so one time in a hypnotic regression, what came up is that there was a lifetime where my father was a missionary and we were like European blue bloods. And for some reason, we would go to these African American villages in Africa and, come in Bible thumping as missionaries. And the leaders of these tribal communities would be furious that, we were trying to come in and influence their rich tradition of their own beliefs and ceremonies and rituals. And I'm sure they were very connected to the earth and the cosmos. And they were doing just fine without our. And so I remember in this hypnotic regression that we came into a village and there was this large African American man, and he was upset that I was playing with the kids, that I was playing with his kids, and we were all having fun playing together. And so he tried to run me off. And that was the dream of being chased through the field.
How long
Yeah.
that was a reoccurring dream? How long did it care? How many years or months or?
I mean, it seems to me I had that dream maybe from the age of 6 to maybe 8.
Okay. Right. And
And
did you?
then
Oh,
flying, you always have flying
so
dreams.
tell us about the flying. So this was when you were
I
young,
loved,
right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, but the flying dream definitely continued into adulthood, but it was different. Like as a kid, I was a bird. I was a bird and I could fly anywhere over oceans and mountains. And as an adult, it was more cumbersome. And I was trying to fly as a person. I was trying to, fly as an adult. And in my dream, I could just run and take off and start soaring over things. But as a child, it was more like a bird.
That's an interesting transformation. I like it. And we'll get more into your current status with that, with the how you dream now. So also, did you experience as a child any sleep paralysis?
Oh, yes,
Ooh,
absolutely.
girl,
If
share.
anything was unnerving to me, you asked if I had a fear, that was unnerving.
Yeah, it
This
often is.
not being able to move,
Yeah.
right? And I definitely remember that as a child. And so these things about these blue beings visiting and about experiencing this paralysis of being awake, but not being able to open my eyes or move and being aware of a presence, that was like two different things. When these blue beings came, it was a positive experience and I had no need. I didn't feel the paralysis during that. But when I would be in paralysis, I would feel as if somebody was actually walking down the hallway and entering my room and standing over me. And it was not the benevolent, loving experience of the blue beings.
Were you able to get any visuals at all on that?
I have not. I have not. It would, but this feeling was intruder, but never uh, physically harmed me. But I still felt like this intruder was doing something beyond just observing me.
Yeah. And also, so with that, move us. So now we've got a foundation. We understand a little bit more, our audience at least, a little bit more about you, where you come from, and all this. Let's move forward into your life. And you had mentioned earlier that there was a period, I think it's a period of lull, and now I can't read my notes for some reason. A period of lull. So you were seeing the Caspers and other stuff, but then there's this period in fairies where that all faded away.
Hmm. And I just became a kid, playing with my friends, going to school, and then a young adult. And then things completely shifted when I was 29 years old living in Philadelphia.
Ooh, Saturn return. Well, bring us to you at 29, and what was the shift that happened?
So I had been born in Northern California, but mostly raised in Southern California. And at the age of 24, got married to a corporate executive who moved us to the East Coast. And so we lived there for 7 years. And by the end of about 5 years, I was miserable. I was also a corporate executive traveling this and that. We had the big house and the fancy car and all, but it, it was making me miserable, especially working for the corporate world and the mean spirited politics. Also, just living back east as a Southern California beach girl, I found the weather to be really brutal and the traffic to be brutal and the mean spirited politics to be brutal. And I started to have anxiety attacks and just an array of physical ailments, including my hair falling out in clumps, eczema all over my skin, respiratory and urinary tract issues. I was underweight and just, at my wits' end. And we ended up moving from New Jersey to Philadelphia. because of my husband's job. And so I was forced to quit my job to accommodate his higher paying job. And when we got to Philadelphia, I could not find a job to save my life. I paid a recruiting firm over $3,000 to try to help me find a job. And no matter what I did or where I went, I couldn't get one. And in retrospect, I know exactly why, because I was not meant to stay there. But about a year into living there, my husband would go off to work in the morning, and we had this bedroom upstairs at the end of the hall. And boom, it started to happen again. Right about dawn, I would be laying there, and suddenly I would wake up because I heard footsteps coming up the stairs and down the hall, and I was completely paralyzed. And there was nothing I could do but lay there in fear of these people, beings, whomever, were coming into my bedroom and standing over my bed. Now, they didn't say anything, but I was very aware of their looming presence. And then they would leave. And shortly after I would hear them leave, I would shake out of the paralysis and sit up, catch my breath, and just, be stunned. And this continued to happen for a few months before finally I was called by my parents to visit them in the desert of Southern California. And this is where my life changed dramatically after I had been with them for a couple of weeks and experiencing love and joy and laughter and fun in the sun, and then realizing my vacation was coming to an end and I was going to have to return to my life in hell. And I was just compelled on one morning, waking up with this impending sense of doom, to run to this mountain range behind their house. And I just ran, and it was dawn and the sun was coming up behind the mountain range. And I was running and crying and thinking I could just run away from my fate. But I knew I had to run to the top of that mountain. And I did. And when I got to the top, I just threw my arms up to the sky and I said, I am miserable in the extreme and I see no way out. And in that moment, I was surrounded by a bright white light. And out of the light, a voice came and said, can't you see you've come home? You will stay here and heal yourself and many others. And when the light cleared and I looked out over the desert landscape, I knew that was the absolute truth for me. And in a moment, I was spontaneously healed. And the person who ran up that mountain, depressed, full of anxiety, physical ailments, was not the same person who ran down. The person who ran down was full of excitement and enthusiasm over my new life in the desert as a healer, and I was full of health and vitality. And over the next 2 weeks, I was just following this force that was guiding me to do this and do that. And in 2 weeks, I completely transformed my life from a stressed out corporate manager on the East Coast to a healer in the desert. In 2 weeks, I left my husband. I moved to Southern California and became a healer in the desert and stayed there and healed myself and many others, just like the voice said I would. I have since had hypnotic regressions of both the incidents that were taking place in Philadelphia and what happened on the mountaintop.
What did your hypno sessions reveal?
So it was uncanny because I had scheduled a hypnotherapy session for a gentleman who was coming for one of my events here in Sedona, and he ended up not being able to take that session. And I had already paid for it for him. So I thought, what the heck? I'll take it for him. So I went to this woman here in Sedona who's quite well known, and you never know what's going to come up, right? So she put me into this deep trance state. And as I went deeper and deeper and deeper, the first vision that arose was me laying in my bed in Philadelphia, and these extraterrestrial looking beings standing over my bed. Again, 3 of them. This time they looked like they were wearing like astronaut uniforms. They had a breathing apparatus on a glass helmet around their head that attached to their suit, but they could take this glass helmet off for a short period of time. And they did. And they had light brown skin with rigid foreheads, and they had a ridge that ran down their nose, and small lips, big brown eyes, and their eyes were complex, like almost like there was geometric patterns and numbers behind them. Their brown eyes were just very complex. And the first one said to me, "Now is the time. It's time for you to enter the third phase of your life, and your life is about to change dramatically, and we are here to prepare you for that. We have come as messengers, and it's actually you who asked us to come for you at this point in your life." And so here we are in service, and they performed some type of energetic transmission that was meant to be sort of an up leveling or maybe a DNA upgrade, but something at a cellular level to prepare me for what was about to happen in the desert of Southern California.
During this time period, were you and how is all this playing out? What was going on in your dream life?
I don't recall vivid dreams around that time. And in fact, even though I have dreams, and for a time after attending some dream workshops, when I moved back to Northern California, I was able to then practice lucid dreaming and like be consciously aware and interactive in my dream. But prior to that, not having a really vivid dream life, although one dream that really sticks out for me was this dream about my sister and I, who were led down this long flight of stairs to the bottom floor of what seemed like a warehouse. And the floor was gray and the walls were gray. But what stood there was this large scale that you could get up on. And there were all of these little gray aliens with big black eyes. And they were so excited. They were jumping up and down. Get on the scale, get on the scale. And so we were like, okay. So I got on the scale and I weighed nothing. And they laughed and clapped their hands. And they said, "Now let your sister get on." And so my sister got on and we still weighed nothing. And they just thought that was so much fun. And then we were caught up in it and we thought it was funny and fun. And everyone was like jumping and laughing. And
Does your sister remember these experiences as well?
no, this was my dream.
Oh, it was a dream. Okay.
It was a dream. Yeah, this was a dream that I started to have around the time that Nish was referencing. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes though, those dreams turn out to be actual things.
Yeah. It very well could be.
Right. So I'm curious if you ever talked to your sister about it, because she might have had the same dream.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, she's coming to visit in a few days. I'll have to ask her about that.
I got to ring the synchro bell now. I
have definitely had dreams where I have woken up and felt like I was just returning. And I have woken up and sat straight up in bed. And I have a habit of leaving my windows open. I feel happier when I am sleeping if there is a window open. Otherwise, I feel claustrophobic and stuffy. but if I open a window and there can be some fresh air coming in, I sleep much better. And so I have clear recall of on a recurrent basis of waking up and sitting up and feeling like I'm just coming back into my body and seeing like a light flash and, fly out through the window. I've also woken up and seen shadow entities standing in my room and learned a technique for sending them away.
What's your technique for sending the shadowy beings away or entities, however we want to frame them?
And it was just intuitive. The first time I sat up and I looked in the corner of my bedroom, and there was a shadow being with a head, shoulders, down to the torso, but nothing beneath the torso. Just an upper body, black shadow. And when I woke up, this shadow being was moving toward me. And I instinctively put up my hands like I was going to catch a basketball. And I pulled all of the energy into my hands and I threw this ball of dark energy out my window and I screamed, "You are not welcome here. Never come back." And all was clear.
When these shadowy beings show up, okay, all right, we got a gap here. So when was it you started actually coming online more with your dreams and into, say, the lucid dreaming period where you're dreaming?
So when in 2007, when the economy took a deep dive, I lost my business and spiraled into a classic dark night of the soul, what my friend Laura Eisenhower would call an underworld initiation. And she says the dark night is a great gift. Well, for me, it actually was, although the dark night was a very painful, dark period of my life. When I woke up out of that underworld initiation and I emerged into the light was bigger and brighter than I had ever seen it before. And I stepped onto a Buddhist path inspired by my sister, who had been on the path for a while. And I dove in head first and started doing these deep trance meditations where I was experiencing bodhisattvas coming and joining me during my meditations. I was able to astral travel. It wasn't long before I started automatic writing and then channeling. And it was around this time that I started to have the more vivid dreams. I was able to see and feel spirit beings in my presence. And then I went to attend the dream workshop, and she taught me how to, engage in lucid dreaming, where I could then be conscious during my dream and engage in my dream and actually direct what was unfolding in my dream.
Who was the teacher? What was the process? As far as, I mean, like,
Mary Mose.
okay. Yeah, that's
Is
what I
her
was trying to
name.
get.
Mary Mose is her name, a beautiful lady. Her and her partner, business partner, Ron Valley, owned the Awakening Center in Brentwood, California. And when I discovered their center, I was thrilled. And so I started, because I was seeking a spiritual community. And so I started to go and attend their classes and workshops and gatherings and meditations. And she was trained in the Carl Jung, Jungian psychology. In fact, she had a PhD in Jungian psychology. And so, as we know, Jungian analysis of dreams is common. And so that was her field of dream interpretation and then lucid dreaming training.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah, we love the Jungian stuff here. So when you first started coming online with OBEs and astral projection, which to me are the same thing. Yeah, it's just the terminology is I think astral projection's a little bit more. Um, I don't know. There's just been a shift in the terminology over the years. But when you started to come into this as a regular praxis, did you first of all, what was the first thing in this process of astral projection through a high state of lucidity that when you come back to this experience of your conscious journey, what was what stuck out? What seemed different in that state of consciousness from this state of consciousness?
Are you referring to the dream state or the meditative state?
Well, the astral projection or high states of lucidity, or even active imagination, which can be another portal.
Mm. So, in deep trance meditation, as taught by the Buddhist, practitioners, um, I immediately, in fact, the very first Buddhist meditation that I went into, right away, I felt three beings sweep into the room. And in fact, the wind of them sweeping in blew my hair back. And I was so thrilled that these spirit beings had come to join me for my meditation. And it wasn't long before I was able to seat myself within my Merkaba vehicle and travel through the cosmos. And it happened so quickly. Like I shot out of my body and went right into the cosmic journey, and over time was able to actually visit other star systems and encounter the beings who lived on different planetary foundations within this galaxy and even in neighboring galaxies. As my skills were more refined, I could travel further and further out into the cosmos. And I knew how to also bring myself back into my body to become present again. And so this would be more in a meditative state. In dream time, it was different because in dream time, through the technique that I was taught, I would engage in dreams that were more relative to the earth experience, maybe traveling into past life experiences, or as we know, simultaneous lives unfolding all at once in different timelines. But I would find myself, for instance, in the jungles of Cambodia, and with the swath, like swathing away the giant leaves so that we could hike, and we would discover like a hidden temple, and it would take me into times in Mayan villages, and even off to Egypt I would go and be alive and well inside a golden pyramid doing priestess initiation. This is more what I would experience with the lucid dreaming states.
Fantastic, and that was a great description of both these states of consciousness. By the way, uh, s-
Wow.
and so in your experience, uh, in your current experience of the dreamscape as you traverse it, and so I'm speaking of definitely when you the dream state, the night side experience. How do you experience the all the tactile stuff and sensate stuff like color, Are you able to read? Is there a sense of scent, uh, touch, those kinds of things that we so that we find common in this construct?
Yes. Everything in the lucid dreaming state was so very real, and I was active in it. Where in regular dream states, you are more of the observer and you're sort of observing yourself having these experiences, or the experience unfolds and you really don't feel like you had anything to do with it. It just was like a movie you were watching. And in the lucid dreaming state, I was very consciously aware of being myself as this particular personality in this movie. And I could choose what to do next and what to say and where to go and, engage in conversations sort of from a place of free will, rather than when you wake up from a normal dream, it just is like this dream happened to you rather than because of you. Does that make sense?
Oh, to me, absolutely. And I think to lots of people out there that are lucid dreamers. So when you're in this, when you're in a lucid dream, are you able to arrange things through that space to affect this state of consciousness where you are functioning as Suzanne Ross?
I don't quite understand the question. Can you rephrase that?
Are you able to change things through lucid dreaming and OBEs that affect you when you're so in here in this state of a seemingly awakeness that we have? Your ego is Suzanne Ross. You're functioning as that character, basically, is how I see it. So, are you able to affect things in this life through lucid dreaming on this
That
timeline?
hasn't been, yeah, right? I mean, that would be a cool goal. Heal things from past lives and,
Yes.
yeah, spontaneously heal in this one. No, that would be a goal to set out for sure. But no, it wasn't like that. Because I stopped doing it. Um, One thing that made me stop doing it is it was actually quite exhausting and I didn't get a good sleep. I was so engaged in these, active nighttime adventures that I would wake up tired, and that just didn't suit my life. I had a busy job and I was actually a personal trainer and, had clients back to back all day and I couldn't be tired. And it was like too much. And so I actually just stopped doing that and sort of just let my dream state return to a normal dream time. In fact, it seems as if now I can willingly or willfully have a very peaceful sleep with very little dreaming or even recall of dreaming. However, on that note, after I moved to Sedona and the extraterrestrial visitations and the missing time experiences really started to become a regular occurrence, then I found myself waking up exhausted and knowing that I was being transported to what seemed to me to be like galactic council meetings and engaged with a group who were making plans and decisions about the fate of the galaxy. I mean, it's just true. The recollections that I have of these dream times are waking up and recalling being in a like a large white conference room, for instance, with a large crystal dome in the center, and the people who were sitting around this round large round table taking up an entire conference room were beings from different star races, and they had different types of uniforms with emblems on their uniforms, and they had different appearances, although humanoid. And I was one of them. I would be one of them. And since I chose to participate in this council meeting willingly in this dream, I would have the opportunity to stand up and share and be part of, actively be a part of this meeting in progress. Um, but I would find from that would get exhausting over time too. But all I had to do was tune in to my cosmic brothers and sisters and just, say, we need to take a break for a while because I need to be well rested for my mission here on Earth in waking time. So,
We hear there are a lot of people, and I too experience this when I am lucid or at a high state of clarity and nowness in the dream state, I suppose, if you want to call it that. I come back and I'm completely exhausted, and I hear that time and time again. And in fact, I think oftentimes it's a good indication for people that have no recall that they were indeed engaged in that kind of, they're out working, they're out doing something, and for some reason, however that mechanism works, the body just doesn't get the rest it needs for. And it almost seems counterintuitive. You'd think if you were not in it, you would feel more rested, but you're not, because you're out doing stuff. Energetically you are. So I'm wondering, what is your experience with precognitive stuff? So this can fall in line with dreaming, of course, but it can also fall in line with how I know I know that you have an awakened psychic body and all this, and this is some of the work you do. What How does that work for you? The precog stuff.
like the psychic awareness.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Yes. And so when I started to engage on a daily basis in these deep trance meditations, I became aware that I could sense the presence of spirits. And then, like I said, I started to realize that I could channel and even do automatic writing. And so it was at this time that I made an effort to develop and refine my psychic abilities. Initially, it was more about understanding who we are, where we came from, why we're here, where we're going. I became very fascinated by the energetic realm and what we're made of, and what is this reality, and how are we able to observe this movie and have our senses engaged to be so awake and aware in it. And so that led to me reading everything I could get my hands on, from quantum physics to religion, even spirituality, of course. And so my understanding of the energetic realm led me to some profound revelations about my soul as being whole, perfect, and complete, standing at the center of my creation, and mentally projecting holographic fractals of my personality into different space time dimensions. But as my eternal soul, the only real aspect of myself standing in the center, I could choose to project my consciousness into all of these incarnations all at once, simultaneously, directing them, observing them. And then, as the holographic fractal myself, have the ability to turn around and look right back at my eternal soul, and then ultimately to see through the eyes of my eternal soul and be able to myself observe other timelines that I was in and even other dimensions that I was in. The multidimensional really came in after a missing time experience, but before that, I was able to do past life regressions for others. And in essence, when you're doing a past life regression, you're doing one of two things or both. You are seeing through the eyes of the eternal soul of this person because you are standing there viewing their other lives in different timelines, and or you facilitate a hypnotic trance state where they are able to do that, stand and observe these movies of themselves unfolding because they've become their eternal soul projecting the holographic images of themselves. So, not to get too heavy, but this is really how my psychic awareness developed over time. And then, like I said, after a missing time experience, um, a few weeks after that, was gifted with the ability to see into higher dimensional realms and visit with higher dimensional aspects of myself and then others as well.
When you so you kind of teased us with this missing time event that was really significant, bringing all this on. Would you share that with us?
Sure. So, when I first started doing ascension meditations using Dr. Joshua David Stone's ascension manuals, I'm going to say 2015, when I first saw the word Arcturian, it jumped out at me. And I right away knew that I had to find out exactly who the Arcturians were and that somehow I was very connected to this race of beings. And so I went to a bookstore, and as so often happens with books I'm meant to pick up and read, it's almost as if they become illuminated on the bookshelf and push out. And this book that illuminated on the shelf was called The Arcturian Anthology by Tom Kenyon. And so I pulled it off the shelf, purchased it, bought it home, and read and read and read. And I knew that in another dimension, I was an Arcturian and that I had my Arcturian brothers and sisters there as well, and that I was being reached out to by my higher dimensional aspect from the star Arcturus, and even my brothers and sisters there, my family, reaching out to try to connect with me here in this dimension. And so I met a couple of people here in Sedona and learned that the gentleman had specifically moved out to a very remote area of the desert. Even though he had a long commute, he wanted to be out in this remote place in order to intentionally call in his Arcturian star family and to actually have physical contact. And he did. They were able to land their craft in this really remote area of the desert, and he was able to go on board, and he developed relationships with these Arcturian star family members. And so one night they were staying with me, and one night we just set an intention to call upon the Arcturians and see if maybe they could lower their ship or somehow make contact with us. And so we thought, okay, we'll stand here and the three of us will hold hands and we'll engage in this intentional transmitting this message to Arcturian star families. And so then we went out on my back deck. It's an upper deck. And we, thought, well, maybe something will happen. Maybe it won't, whatever. And so the first thing that happened is the lights on the deck came on, which can only be turned on from inside the house. So we kind of looked at each other and thought, okay, well, that was a little creepy. And then we saw this bright white light, a huge flash, an explosion of light on the horizon. And shortly after that, Megan grabbed the handrail and said, I feel dizzy. And I grabbed the handrail and said, I feel dizzy too. And then the motion detector at the bottom of the stairwell went off, the one halfway up and the one at the top. And we just stared at the stairwell because it was as if somebody was coming up the stairs, but we didn't see anybody. And the next thing we knew, we were just standing there on the deck, freezing cold and wondering why the heck we were still standing on the deck. And we came inside and sat down in the living room. And we were also disoriented and exhausted. So we couldn't even carry on any conversation. And I just said, I'm going to bed. And I thought, why in the heck am I going to bed at 8:30 at night? Because we had gone out there about 8 and it certainly didn't seem like any more than a half hour. And so I went to bed and I had my phone in my hand. I laid it on the nightstand and turned it over and it said 12:40. And I was shocked. But I was so exhausted, I just fell fast asleep. And the next morning, I woke up and I was nauseated and disoriented, still dizzy. And I walked out to the kitchen, looked at the coffee maker, and thought, no way. I just got a glass of water and was sipping on the water. And then my friend Megan came out and Matthew came out, and they all looked white and nauseated. And we just sat there sipping on water. And Matthew said, did you see what time it was when we went to bed last night? And I said, yeah. And we all just sat there stunned. It wasn't like we were excitedly saying, oh my God, do you think we got taken up? Or it wasn't like that at all. We just sat there in silence. And it
That's
wasn't until later in the day that we actually started to feel better. Go ahead.
That's incredible. It was for the sake of people listening. What was the name of the book again? The Arcturian one.
The Arcturian Anthology by Tom Kenyon.
Okay, good. And Jerry will put that in the chat and also in my private. I had a crazy Arcturian experience. I didn't know anything about him until I almost feel ashamed until rather recently. And but I experienced him as blue. So I'm not sure, I don't know. I'm not familiar with everything around them, but it was very clear that was what I was experiencing, and it came through very visceral, like your hair being blown back. I had this thing came into my house like that, like almost on the wind.
If I recall correctly, Arcturians are associated with blue for some reason.
Do you know, Suzanne, is blue significant to them?
That's not my recall, but like any planet, there could be different, versions of Arcturians and or being advanced beings. Maybe they have the ability to come in any image that you or I would most resonate with.
Yeah. They appeared to me not like Casper. They appeared like the Hindi gods, and that you see in India all over, that type of blue.
Blue bloods. Too much copper.
Our silver is this colloidal. That's remarkable though. And Jerry, did you get the link for that book?
Yeah, it's in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And so at what point so we know when in 2007 you had this in your life, did this shift and all that. When did you come online and start working accepting. So you were open always. You had this really wonderful childhood and wonderful parents that allowed that. So that the doors of perception have just always been there for you. Uh, but through all this, and then coming into 2007, when you had this dark night experience, that led to where you are now. When did you start coming online and coming forward with this, your new set of skills and this new awakening, this new perception, this new path that had obviously always been there for you, and that brought you forward into the public eye and doing what you do now? Was there something that pushed you that way, or were you just guided? Even that's the same thing, actually. Were you pushing yourself that way, or were you feeling guided? Did someone say, "Hey, Suzanne, write this book," or because you have two books, correct?
Mhm. Yes, thank you for knowing that. I love radio show hosts who actually do their homework before the show.
I checked
Thank
you
you.
out.
Yes, there was. So during this time of really just awakening, and this would be starting in 2008, part of my meditative process that was really effective was walking meditations, because I've always felt very connected with nature. And so I would head out, and as I walked, I would say these Buddhist prayers, and I would start to observe myself shifting into my golden light body. And so essentially, I'm walking in remote areas of nature where there's no artificial structures or even other people, except for just the animals. And I would be walking through the creation as my golden light body, and I would start to experience shifting and the reality around me becoming sparkling light and all of the colors becoming very fluorescent and fluid. And it was then that I really started to understand the holographic nature of reality in fractals, and the water is liquid consciousness, and everything is consciousness. Form is crystallized consciousness. But then got interested beyond the energetic realm into the bigger questions of who are we? Why are we here? Where do we come from? And so I became very fascinated by the meaning and purpose of our existence. And so that led me to start reading more of different religious beliefs, different spiritual belief systems. And I was just seeking a clear and simple answer for the meaning and purpose of life when, after reading many books, I was walking out in nature one day and I was looking down at the ground and I was just going, meaning and purpose, meaning and purpose. And I felt a tap on my shoulder and a voice whisper in my ear, look up. And I looked up, and written across the sky in puffy white lettering, it said, meaning to create, purpose to evolve. And I just stood there staring at this skywriting, and I knew I was witnessing a miracle. But when the awe wore off, I was just consumed with this like overwhelming sense of relief. Thank you for just a clear and simple answer. Of course, the meaning of life is to create and the purpose is to evolve. It's
Yes.
so simple, right? So I went home and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and this light was just streaming through my window. It was like all of this sparkling light surrounding me, and I was so ecstatic. And then I remembered my revelation from the day before, and it's like I wanted to run out into the street and say, does everybody know the meaning of life is to create and the purpose is to evolve? Like, okay, no, I'll be hauled off by the men in the white jackets. And so I stood there in the kitchen for a minute after I'd gone downstairs, and suddenly I just felt this energy pulling me up the stairs, down the hall, plop down in front of the computer, and start typing furiously. And when I came to hours later, and I looked at the computer, and I had written pages and pages of what looked to be some kind of training modules. And as soon as I came back into my body, I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. Oh my God, I'm starving. So I went downstairs and I realized that it was like 3-4 hours later. And once I took care of my body, I came back up and realized that what I had written was a mind, body, spirit workshop. It was so clearly written out. 6 weeks. Here's your modules for the mind. Here's your modules for the spirit. And here's the modules for the body. And so I was just stunned because I had been doing some automatic writing, but it was more like putting pen to paper and it would be these little squiggly lines. This was just typing on the computer like mad. And so I went for a nature walk and I started talking to spirit and I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Where would I teach this? And the other voice was like, duh, you work in a wellness center. There's over 5,000 members. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a personal training coach and a nutritional counselor. Like, no. And the voice just said, you'll figure it out. So I thought, well, okay. I sent it to my boss. And the next day we met in this large aerobic room sitting on 2 big exercise balls. And he's looking at my printout and he says, so you want to bring mind and spirit into your programming? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, the body is just a vehicle for the eternal soul after all. I was like, what? Whose boss says that? Right. But I mean, he gave me the green light. He gave me the green light to go forward with mind, which was thought expansion, consciousness projection, understanding the power of intention. For the spirit, it was breathing practices, visualization, meditation. For the body, it was a purification program and movement. And for the first one, I had 12 people sign up, which I thought was rather symbolic. And what was just supposed to be 6 weeks turned into 4 months, 5 months, and more people joining and telling me what a powerful, positive impact it was having on their lives, both professionally and personally. And I had to write for these workshops and present. And as I did, I started to realize that I enjoyed writing. And one day on one of my nature walks, I heard a voice out of the air come through and say, it's time for you to write a 30-day book on the evolution of consciousness. And I'm like, a book? I'm not an author. 30 days, the evolution of consciousness? That sounds really heavy, man. Like,
Oh, yeah. That sounds
all right.
daunting.
What are you talking about? Not going to happen. Well, here we are several years later, and I have 3 10-day books basically on the evolution of consciousness.
And did they come through the same way? Is this your first is the workshop that you presented to your boss and then which led to all this?
Yes, there was a lot of channeling. In fact, I made it clear to Spirit that whatever came through for these books had to come from Spirit, because at the time I had read a lot of books and I had attended other people's classes and workshops, and I did not want to copy anything else anyone else was doing. This had to be authentic from Spirit. And so Spirit cooperated and channeled through me the process in my first book, Wake Up, which is a process of karmic cause and effect analysis where people apply the most transformational experiences of their life to this karmic cause and effect analysis. And when they identify the causes of these transformational experiences and the effects that they had on others, the life lessons hidden within become perfectly clear, especially after time and again the patterns reveal themselves. And so the idea is to identify the life lessons you came here to learn, apply them to your life today by intentionally creating meaningful experiences so that you can consciously evolve toward more enlightened ones. In effect, meaning to create, purpose to evolve. So now you're intentionally creating meaningful lives and purposefully evolving toward more enlightened ones.
Have you ever channeled or encountered what you would consider like an inorganic or an artificial intelligence? Collective?
Oh, I'm going to have to say no to that. The beings that have come through me are very conscious beings with distinct personalities. In fact, that's how I'll know who it is, by the essence of their personality,
Mhm.
sort of their frequency
Their energy,
signature,
yeah.
if you will. And,
Yep,
Mhm.
totally get that.
You guys, can you excuse me for just 1 second? I
Sure.
have to let my dog out.
Go for it.
Okay, just be 1 second.
Do 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 do.
We do
So
need a little that kind of
I
music.
watched that new Picard show, the Star Trek Picard.
Oh yeah,
It's really good.
yes,
I liked it a lot.
and it has
Okie doke.
oh, hello, welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah. It became apparent that my dog needed to go out.
Feces occurs, as they say.
So we're just following up on Jerry's query. What are your thoughts on this, the kind of AI stuff that's lingering around? Where do you, what's your intuition say about it? What's going on in your mind when that kind of language comes forth?
I mean, I suspect that many of the gray aliens that people experience are, some of them anyways, I'm not going to say all races of gray aliens, but some of them are likely programmed AI doing the bidding of higher intelligence, higher intelligent beings that have an agenda. And it feels to me like AI would essentially be being directed by beings with an agenda, an agenda for humanity, and likely more of a malevolent one, more of a controlling agenda in order to achieve certain things that have to do with power and control. Yeah, that would be my take on that. Um,
So as we move further into these times where that is becoming part of the collective narrative, and it's getting it's definitely interwoven within the ET and the ufology and the cryptid community for sure. Do you, and so I'm asking this of you as I'm asking your psychic self this, where do you think that could be leading us?
I mean, for starters, I, although I want to be a realist, and you can ask a lot of my friends who know me quite well, and my perspectives are always looking toward the light and expanding into the light of a higher way of living and being that doesn't involve any of the darker agendas. So I haven't and or don't spend much time at all concerning myself with things like AI or even more malevolent races that may have a darker agenda. And that's how I would position AI within that realm. And so um, I truly feel, and this is just my personal feeling, and believe me, I've been taken to task on it numerous times, but um, that where your attention goes, energy flows, and that we as humanity create our realities individually and collectively. So we can make a choice. We can choose to create a reality where we are sovereign beings who have the power to manifest heaven here on earth above and beyond any agenda of a non benevolent flavor, and that we can rise above any AI reality that may be unfolding. And in fact, we can choose to create an AI reality and have that be our new reality here as a collective, and or we can choose to have a reality where we are sentient sovereign beings here on this earth plane creating unity consciousness in love and light and peace and harmony. I really do believe we create our realities and we can do one or the other. um, I remember being at a conference, a large I'll just say it's Contact in the Desert, and I was interviewing a very high level person who everybody in this industry knows very well, and I'm just going to let them remain nameless. Um, but they were going to step onto stage, and this would be someone that the entire conference would flock to see. So they would be in front of thousands of people,
It's got to be
and they would
Wilcock or
stand up
good.
there. They were planning to go into their presentation in an hour, and they were going to tell the entire audience that our new reality would be AI, and that demons were coming through the astral plane, and this would be our future, and we just better prepare for it. And I said, well, I would like to offer that you are then going to be an important part of creating just that, because we create this reality with our thoughts. And these people, to you, they are an icon. You are an icon. So if you go out there and you tell them this, they are going to go out there and collectively create it with the power of their thoughts. And they're going to share it with all their friends. And before you know it, AI could be the reality of our future. Or you could go out there and use your power in a much more positive way and talk about angels coming through the astral realm and talk about us rising up as sentient sovereign beings who can come together in unity communities and rise above all of this. What do you choose? Well, because it's more popular to talk about demons and AI and conspiracy theory and going down the dark rabbit hole, they choose to do that because it sells more books, apparently. But there you have it. There's my take on it, my friends.
Well, with that
There's my
said,
standing on my soapbox.
with that
But you're
said,
not wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, and that's something I've worried about too.
Thanks, Jer.
All the fear porn is going to manifest. People talk about like Project Bluebeam and fake alien invasions and all this shit. I'm like, you're manifesting by talking about it so much. and focusing. Yeah,
100%.
I totally agree.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
The conundrum here is, since we're part of the collective, and this is, I'm just bringing in, I think, some just another angle. So, since we're part of the collective and those narratives, those stories are feeding a collective tulpa, if you will. Uh, and like you said, where I always say what you feed grows is kind of where I go with that analogy. But it is being fed. And so how do those of us that are choosing to not ride the waves of that timeline work around the collective that seems to be really engaged in that narrative? And it's certainly being fed, and it does seem to be growing.
I mean, for me personally, I just continue to inspire and empower and, make my speech that I just made to you guys on air. I have a couple of radio shows myself, and I just continue to bring in the light and raise the frequency. The more people that I can effectively raise their love light frequency, then the more people who wake up out of that and turn toward the light and turn away from the shadows. So, my mission here on earth is to do everything in my power to shine the brightest light I can on humanities individually, and collectively. And I have had people come to visit me who were very wrapped up in the conspiracy theory and, going down the rabbit hole of all of these, darker, malevolent agendas and evil aliens. And, they've come to stay with me. And I've just told them just what I told you. You know why you're so sick all the time? Is because of where your attention is going, and you're drinking and you're smoking pot and you're going down the black hole because that's where your attention is flowing. And on more than a few occasions after staying with me for a few days, they will violently start throwing up and having, this complete like transformation.
You pull demons
Of
out of people.
Exactly.
Yep.
I mean, and they'll come out and they'll say, "My God, black and green goo is coming out of my body, Suzanne." And I'm like, "Well, the light here is very bright, and this is a good thing." And then they'll call me and say, "You know what? I put away my iPad. I'm not following all that crap anymore. I'm not staying up till 2 a.m. engaging in these late night shows that are all about that. And my life and my health has improved dramatically. I'm spending more time in nature." I mean, you know?
I have a
So,
pet theory that Apple products are a big contributor to what's happening, to the infection, if you will.
right. Right. I mean, talk about AI. Our phones are AI. I mean, right. Like,
Well, they're not technically AI, but they
much
talk to an
comparing
AI.
into
They communicate with
that.
AIs.
Yeah.
Phones
Yeah.
aren't, they're
I
not,
believe
they're not,
that.
powerful enough to house an AI. So they just communicate with one in the back behind the scene.
Yeah. 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 That makes perfect sense to me.
With so back to when you were writing these books and all that, did you get any information? Was any of this interactive through your dream life at all?
I'm going to say it was around that time that I started to become aware that I was leaving my body at night and returning in the morning. So some of the beings that I first started to channel were ascended masters. And it became apparent to me that what was happening at night is that I was being taken out of my body and being present in different star systems. Like, I started to experience different futuristic realities on these other Earth like foundations. where they had pyramids that were made of pure crystal and crystal obelisks and crystal domes. And each of these different buildings would serve a different purpose, but it was all around enlightenment and initiation and healing and training. And I would see myself actually land in like a pod ship and step out and be greeted by these star people and or these ascended masters who would be in these crystal temples performing different activities, but all around enlightenment and healing. And I would see like these advanced light chambers that people would get in for healing, and even like immersed in water in tanks. Um, yes. And so that started to take place in dream time, to where the next day I would have recall of that happening. And then it's more recent here, since I moved to Sedona, that I have more of a sense of going, being part of like a galactic council of beings, more in a planning or decision making role.
This is fantastic. I love it. Okay, so and just to get to this, because I can't believe the time. It amazes me. Where where do those that cross the veil, which everyone that listens know how I feel about it. Birth and death are kind of the same thing. Uh, but those that have passed on, and in particular those that we know personally, so that personally, what is going on with that process, and have you been able to tap into, say, via dream or active awareness or your psychic awareness, when a person's transitioning and they don't know it, or have been able to know if that has happened? um where are you with the whole death thing, and have you been able to tap into other people's transitioning that they may not have known they were transitioning, that kind of thing? What's going on with the idea of death?
So I had the experience of my mother in law and father in law moving in with my husband and I for 9 months while his mother was dying of cancer. And she ultimately did pass away in our master bedroom. And on the day that, and this is a woman who did not want to hear anything about the possibility of any kind of afterlife. To her, it was lights out, that's it. And she didn't want to hear about any other possibility. And so, it wasn't my place to impose any of my beliefs upon her. So I just let it be. But on the morning that she was passing, my father in law came downstairs and said, "I think Jenny's passing. And so, can you go be with her?" So I got to the top of the stairs and kind of went, like I've never been with a dying person before, but of course I'll go do this. And I went in there, and her body was laying there, and her eyes were wide open, and her mouth was open, and she was doing this death gurgle. Physically, her body was laying there. She was not home. Her spirit had already gone traveling. And it was apparent to me that her spirit was on the ceiling and moving around the house, going down to find out where her husband was, and even sailing off to go see where her children were. And as I sat there with her, I was able to vicariously experience what she was experiencing. And I knew that that was the first thing she wanted to do when she left her body in this pre-death state, was to, first of all, when she was found herself on the ceiling looking down at her body, sort of this shock. And I was talking to her as I sat there holding her hand. First of all, I sang Amazing Grace. And then I just started to talk to her. And sometimes she would come back into her body and she would squeeze my hand, and I could tell she was back. But I gave her permission to go ahead and travel and do what she needed to do. When her family was then gathered around her, she started saying, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah." And she just did that for like hours. So it was really interesting to experience that. When my father was passing, he was still alive physically. And we went to the hospital and we knew he didn't have much longer. But I went home. I took my mom home and we were sitting there on the bed. And all of a sudden, the front door blew open. The door to the bedroom opened wide. The dog jumped up and all the hair was up on its back, staring at nothing, standing in the doorway. My mother looked at me with her eyes wide as saucers, and I just said, "Hi, Dad. We're okay. We're going to be just fine. Everything is okay." And he died that night. So I certainly believe, and this has been my experience. And even after the next night, he came back and I told him if he came back to flicker lights or let me know that he was okay. And I was sleeping in his bedroom. And the next night, I went into the bedroom and the lights flickered on and off and on and off and on. I was like, "That's a cool trick, Dad." But I have since been able to communicate with my father. He has come through with messages from beyond that were important generationally and even for us right now. So I've been able to communicate with him. So yes, I mean, I believe that, when your body starts to go, that you can travel out of your body and ultimately you take your last breath and there you have it. Your spirit is off on its, adventure beyond the physical. And I do believe in the Buddhist and Egyptian and even Tibetan perspective that you go into the state of Bardo, where you can be surrounded by your spirit family and you can reflect upon the life you just lived and sort of watch a movie of it and see where you learned your lessons and see where you didn't and make a conscious choice to either reincarnate or to stay in the spiritual realm for a while, to serve in a different way, or maybe to go through more training about how to be in an incarnated body.
When you say you communicate with your father, how does that come through now? Is it through dreams or is it through meditation? How does that happen?
Well, sometimes he'll just wake me up in the middle of the night and it'll be 3 in the morning and he shakes me. It's almost as if his hands are on my shoulder and he's waking me up. And he called me Susie. And he's like, "Susie, Susie, Susie, wake up." And, I have to go to my meditation space, my shrine space, and sit there and he'll come through. There was a time when there was some conflict in the family, and he woke me up in the middle of the night and he said, "You go sit down in your shrine space and we're going to work through this." And he
Mm,
even brought in his father, who he had reconnected with on the other side, and his father. So it
mm.
was like this multi generational issue that needed to be resolved all the way back and forgiven completely before what was unfolding in the here and now could be resolved and cleared. And magically, when I was able to resolve it for them and completely forgive them on the other side, the issue here just dissolved
Oh,
like
wow.
magic.
Wow. That's I love hearing this, and I love that this actually happened while you were in this kind of conscious state, and that it would wake you up, that he woke you up, and that you moved into this space to consciously, which to me is complete lucidity, to have this interaction, and that it did heal some family wounds from the past to move forward.
Hmm. Yes.
That's a the death thing is hard for some people to talk about, and And other people's are fine. Other people are fine. I'm so comfortable with it. There's been so much around me, but it's always reaffirming to hear these great. Uh, I don't know. I'm I'm refreshed by your perspective, Suzanne. It's really been refreshing to hear how your perception of all this shines through. And I really think that so much of it goes back to how open your parents were as when you were a child. Of course, it's a shining example of who you are, but I do think some of this was your early, as you know, programming, your models, your role models. And it's just wonderful that that openness leads to who you are now and what you're doing moving forward, which is bringing a lot of hope, especially in times that when one looks out, they could appear, times it can appear very desperate and dark at this moment. Um, I'm wondering, Jerry, did you get any questions?
No. Oh. Have you heard about illness being hooked to past lives?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, it's one of the sessions that I offer either online or in person. And we are able to move into a higher consciousness state where my client themselves actually tells me what past life is coming through for them. And many times it is trauma from these past lives, whether it's physical or emotional, that has led them to be experiencing exactly the physical or emotional ailments that they are in this lifetime. And
Or
when we are able to go
energetic, even?
back, yes, yeah,
Hmm. Able to go back. I'm
when
sorry to
we're able
interrupt you.
to go, oh, that's okay, dear.
I did it again.
Interrupt anytime, of course. It's your show. But um, when we're able to go back and actually rewrite the script so that it happens in a different way that is not traumatic, we actually change the past to affect the future
So
in
it
a more
almost sounds like
positive
the
way.
QTTH modality,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
quantum something healing.
The Dolores Cannon stuff?
Yeah.
No, did she do that?
Yeah. I thought she was, I swear. I guess that's something to look
Maybe
up.
my Dolores Cannon knowledge was very small. All right, I got another
Well,
question.
oh,
If a
cool.
person feels stuck with a good way to get unstuck when finances are an issue, so can't get consultation, just ask the spirits. Not really cool.
If a person
Feel stuck. What is it? Oh,
is,
what is a good way to get unstuck
okay,
if they're broke? Just ask the spirits? Question.
I mean, again, right? Like, um, probably something to do with the past life and, doing some type of peering into past lives that are creating a lack of abundance or flow. So it really has more to do with flow. And this person asking is clearly aware of that because they are aware that they're stuck. And so the energy isn't flowing. And so it is being blocked by some sort of emotional trauma, probably even possibly from this life. And when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be, something very traumatic, but possibly something from childhood, a lack of belief in their ability to be showered with abundance. or to create abundance. Um, Sometimes it comes down to feeling a lack of worthiness, maybe not feeling worthy enough to attract that abundance. But again, oftentimes it goes back to either earlier in life, maybe something in childhood, something they were told time and again, um, that they're still holding on to and haven't been able to let go of. But if we can look at that movie and identify that, again, we can let then go of it, whether it was maybe earlier in this life or it was in a past life.
All right. That's all the questions we have in chat. I had one, but I forgot what it was now. Damn it. Oh, so of all the entities that you've contacted or been in contact with, do you feel that they're physically in our dimension, if you will, or our timeline, or are they in alternate adjacent?
I like to think of dimensions because after my missing time experience, what I was really shown is that, in a sense, these dimensions are somewhat stacked with, if you will, like 3D being the lowest density of incarnation, then going up. And as it goes up, it gets wider and wider and wider so that 4D can interact with 3D and 5D can most certainly interact with 4D and 3D, because what happens is it's an expansion of consciousness. And so while 3D cannot necessarily see beyond the spectrum of 3D, as you go higher up in the dimensions, those higher dimensional beings sort of becomes like one mind. And many 5D and 6D beings will say that they can read our minds. And it's not an intrusion, it's just that they have become part of the bigger mind that envelops everything in the dimensions they're in and below them. And so I think these dimensions that I am able to, these beings I am able to interact with, are coming through other dimensions, and that being higher dimensional beings, it's very difficult for them to lower their vibrational frequency enough to actually materialize physically in this low density dimension.
Hmm.
So they come through more as telepathically and through channeling.
I've always pictured, if you will, the third dimension as a projection of the fourth dimension, or a shadow of, like, the energy that's projected from 4D manifests here as physicality. But that's just the way I have it in my head. Doesn't mean it's right.
The astral realm, being 4D, as many believe, is an interesting place.
Especially the lower fourth dimension apparently is party town over there.
I mean, I do believe it's the realm of angels and demons, and I believe it's the realm of choice, and it's where the being transitions into to make that choice. You know, would you like to continue to work through the shadows? And there's no judgment about that whatsoever. It simply means they are not done learning the important lessons that can only be learned in a reality of duality and working in the shadows. Or are you done learning through separation and suffering, and you are ready to choose to serve the light selflessly and ascend, and now learn through unity and peace and health and vitality and harmony? You know, are you ready to ascend beyond the fourth dimension and into a higher fifth dimensional experience? And I believe that we can ascend in our consciousness right here and now and stay in our physical bodies and interact in the 3D realm but start to create realities around us that are certainly not your standard 3D realities. We can blow the lid off this 3D false matrix and expand beyond it to see the truth of who we are as eternal, infinite, and immortal beings
We just
capable of. Go ahead.
no, we just need that 100th monkey.
Yes.
The tipping
tipping
point.
point,
Yep,
yeah.
exactly. Right.
Mm.
I don't have any more questions.
I mean, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
And that is one perspective, although I do waver back and forth to think that, yes, the 100th monkey, and then maybe we activate the matrix for global ascension, and all of us go into the higher dimensional reality that we create here on this earth plane. However, I also am curious about the possibility that some just aren't ready to ascend. They just got here not but a few lifetimes ago, and they aren't done with 3D yet. And they certainly aren't ready to ascend. And if you look around, you can certainly see there are people who are just enjoying the 3D drama. And this is where they want to stay and be for a while. And so they, can stay in this 3D reality, and maybe the spirit of Mother Earth ascends and we go with her as the ones who have chosen ascension.
Right.
Mm. Mm.
Right. True.
Yeah, feeling
And all
that
the
with-
other
especially-
planets too.
Yeah, with the sentience of these celestial bodies, especially Earth that we inhabited this.
It's all going to
particular
happen on the equinox in December. The great conjunction.
Anything's
Right.
possible if we get we feed it,
We're going to
right?
get that purple flash and the event's going to happen. We're going to all go to 5D. Anyway.
And it's happening. It's happening because
it
I
is.
used to think, when is it going to happen? My God, this ascension is going to happen or what? And it's like, it's happening. I mean, I look around at my own life, my
right.
God, it's like the reality I've created for myself is so incredibly beautiful and expansive and sparkling with golden light. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, the
sometimes
event,
I wake up my good fortune,
Yeah.
right? So
it's an inside job. It's what it's, it's personal. It's not a
Yes.
group thing.
Yes, definitely. This has been so, as I said, it's been refreshing, and it's really nice to bring someone on that is emanating this energy out as a beacon. So thank you so much, Suzanne.
Yes, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to plug?
Sure. I am the designer of a television network called SciSpy.tv, SCISPI.tv, merging science and spirituality in a new genre that came to me in meditation, SciSpy. So I invite your listeners to visit SCISPI.tv. We now have over 7 channels and 30 shows. And also my personal website is SuzanneRossWellness.com. I do live here in Sedona, Arizona, and we have a spectacular spring equinox retreat coming up on March 20th through 22nd. And you can find that at SedonaAscensionRetreats.com. I also have a big event coming up in April 10 through 12 with Stars of Ancient Aliens coming to visit here in Sedona. And we'll be going to key portal sites here in Sedona. Both events involve tours out in the Red Rocks. For that event in April, you can just go to beyondthematrix.tv, and you can join me on Transcend the Matrix on Truth Frequency Radio every Tuesday and Thursday night at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Right, fantastic. If Giorgio is one of the
Thank
people
you.
coming to your retreat, tell him to read my email.
Okay.
I've invited him a few times to be on the show.
Ah.
All right.
Yes, we have Andrew Collins coming, and David Childress lives right down the street from me, as does Clifford Mahudi. And Laura Eisenhower will be coming. Maria Wheatley is coming.
I like
Brad
Maria.
Olson, Brooks Agnew. Yeah,
I love
beyondthematrix.tv.
And I love David
Mhm.
Childress too. I've been
Yeah,
meaning
Childress
to
is
write to
awesome.
him.
I want
Him
Maria
and
Wheatley
his
on
wife,
so bad
people.
too.
I thought
Maria's awesome.
I can write to her.
Yeah.
I'm behind in my inviting. Anyway,
Well, come on out to Sedona for the event. Set up a booth. Do your show live from our
all right.
event.
When is it again?
April 10th.
April 10th through 12th, and you can just go to beyondthematrix.tv. Check it all out.
I'll write that down.
Excellent.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been awesome talking to you. Fantastic conversation. And thank you, Nish. And thank you, everyone who listens in the future and in the past. It's a quantum show, you know.
Wherever you are, whenever you are.
Right. Wherever you are, what is it? What's this saying? Wherever you go, there you are. Right.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you, guys.
Sure.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's been really fun.
Yep. And,
It's been a pleasure, definitely.
Be sure to tune in next week. I think we have an obelisk.
Is it already?
No, I'm wrong. Next week we have Mark Anthony Wyatt from Cornwall. Ghost guy.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's probably going to be an early show, like 5 p.m. so Eastern. So I will post it as soon as I hear back from him. I don't think he wants to stay up till 2 a.m. because he's in Cornwall.
I love Cornwall.
All right, everyone, have a great night. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.